Hey everybody. So when I was reviewing the videos from last week's class, I noticed that in class I said if there was something different on the MacBook, I would explicitly state it. And then about 45 seconds later, I skipped right over something that is different on the MacBook and didn't explicitly state it. Um, Only one person said they're using a Mac. Nobody mentioned Linux. So hopefully you're familiar with your Mac. If not, I still wanted to make a video. So as soon as I noticed that this morning, I was like, oh, I better get a video showing the differences, which probably would have been good to do anyway. So I thought I'd make a quick one. So what I did is I put, you'll notice I'm on a Zoom call with from three of my machines, my Windows machine, the MacBook, and I used the Chromebook just to access the Linux version as the one sitting on my desk running when I started this video. So the three main systems, I thought I'd do a quick pass. I downloaded the files from class the other day and was just going to run them on all three systems real quick to show the little differences. So I'll start on the PC, which is what we saw in class, but might as well include that anyway and have all three in one video. So you use command prompt to get Windows X and get the command prompt there. Having used that for decades, I was a little hesitant to switch over to PowerShell, but once I did, I was very, very happy. PowerShell didn't take anything away. All the old Windows command prompts commands still work. They added to it. So I'll mostly be using PowerShell for class on my own Windows machine. I'm going to switch to the folder where I downloaded the stuff. So if I list out, you can see there's our example from class the other day. So change directory into that. Class 1, example, class 1, example, prep. And now there's the files from class the other day. So we saw if we wanted to work with Python and Windows, you just hit Python. It'll jump over to the command prompt. We can check and make sure pygame is installed. There at the Python prompt, the three angle brackets, checking the import pygame command, and we should get this message. So I'll go ahead and exit out of this. And when we're just in the regular working with the directories prompt on the Windows operating system, list out our files. I guess I should use the Windows command instead of the Linux command since I'm here. Oh yeah, that's another advantage of PowerShell. They didn't take the old Windows commands away. They added stuff to it, including some Linux commands. But there's the files from the other day, including the test1.py. So if we open that, start Notepad++ with test1.py. So here's the file we did in class the other day. Just initialize the game with the clock, set up so the keys reset, holding a key resets so it doesn't count as just one single event. Brought in some images, the bare minimum in our main pygame loop, check some events, loaded the images, flipped the display or updated the display and going for 60 frames a second. And whenever it's closed, there's eventually a graceful shutdown. Went over all this in class, talking about what those mean, and we'll see those again and again. So back over in PowerShell, now to run that, we can just type Python. We'll say, okay, start the Python interpreter and start it with the file test1.py or whatever you named your Python script. And when we run that, it automatically runs, opens up our game window, and we set the WASD keys to move that image around the background. That's what we saw in class. And then it goes this. So it's very similar in the other systems, but there is a slight difference in Python. So I wanted to go ahead and make sure and explicitly show that. Then when we're done with the prompt, we can exit that and then Control W to close out of the or whatever to close out of the text editor. So let's look at it on some other systems. Excuse me. So I'll do the MacBook next. Come over here, and the MacBook always hides the share screen button after it resized the window. Those zoom buttons always go right behind the dock on the MacBook. There it is. So I'll share my screen over here. Okay, so I'll do basically the same thing. I'll start terminal, and it's a little bit different. What's different is if we just type Python in the MacBook, and this is the thing I should have pointed out in class. Well, Windows OS, not Windows, sorry, Mac OS X has some things that were written in Python 2.7, so that's always included on the MacBook. So if you just type Python, you get Python 2.7, which is kind of old because we're on Python 3.9 now. I'll do that check again real quick. So if I type the import pygame instruction, get this error message, couldn't find it. So give the exit command and clear this out. So I'm going to room on this screen. What's different is we need, since an old version of Python is always going to be on a Mac, we have to explicitly state we want the new version. So we have to ask for Python 3. So the command is going to be Python 3. And you can see there's no error message. And if I do import pygame here, we get that normal message. So that's working, which is also a little bit different for the pip command. I can show that on Windows before I move on real quick. Let me hit stop share and go back over to the Windows machine real quick. Share this and restart PowerShell. Because when I install pygame on Windows, just type pip install pygame. And it kind of ran through here and did all this. It's already installed, so nothing to show, but that was the instruction right there, which is slightly different on one of the Unix-based systems. So let me come back over to the MacBook here. And here in the terminal, if I try to type pip install pygame, it doesn't know what pip is. So what we have to do is save the Python 3, because in Python 3 there's a module, so -m pip install pygame. So we have to, on the Unix systems, we have to explicitly state we're in Python 3 first, and then this -m command is saying what module to look at in Python 3, and then the rest of that line will look the same, which it's already installed, so nothing really to do here. Then I'll navigate over to where I put the same files on. I went ahead and downloaded them before class. So there's the class 1 example prep. There's the example for Monday. We'll see that tomorrow, or it'll be in an upcoming video, recorded class session. I go in that folder and we can see we have the background images, the player image, and test1.py game. So I'll open that up, test1.py. So using the Atom text editor here, open test1.py file to take a look at it. So the same file we just looked at, bring in and initialize the library, set up a clock, and I guess that's more of a release. When we hold a key, it takes 10 milliseconds to count as an event, and then 10 milliseconds will stop, kind of release the event. Set up our display, some images, and the most basic main loop for the most basic main loop for a pygame game. So if we come back over to terminal, then to run it, you have to explicitly state Python 3 test1.py. So really, it's just that 3 is needed. Oh, and it flashed briefly there when it loaded. You'll notice that on the MacBook, there's a couple extra lines. I don't know if that's just my MacBook or it always happens on a Mac because of the increased graphics quality. There's some extra space that needs filled in. Let me restart that again. It's right, it's in the very back. So as soon as we put images in there, it gets covered up. But there's a couple lines there that hopefully the image showed. I'll use the MacBook in an upcoming example in class soon. But that's one of those differences. Instead of just typing Python like window, we want to make sure and use Python 3 for pygame. And when you use pip to install stuff, you need that -m, and then everything else will match what just gets typed correctly in the Windows machine. And to finish out this example, I thought I'd go ahead and show a Linux version as well, which the Linux system I have handy is on my Chromebook. So I'll share the screen on my Chromebook, which is basically the same thing as Mac. Before I do that, on the Mac, one more thing to show. I guess I should address what happens if you don't see the Python 3 there, right? If you type Python 3 and you don't get the prompt, it just says doesn't recognize it or something. You'll use brew to install it. So I think it's just brew install Python 3. And brew should have been installed there on your MacBook. So you just run that, and so you can see it's not an error message. It's downloading right now. Hit Control-C to cancel what's going on, and it'll shut down its homebrew. It takes a second to shut down, so I'll just leave that doing that while I come back over to the Chromebook this time. That's the Linux system I had close by at hand. So if you aren't familiar with this, all Chromebooks now have the Linux terminal built in. It's been a test feature for a while. I think it's finally official now. So it's just there's a Windows, not a Windows, I keep saying that. There's a virtual Linux desktop on the Chromebooks now. So it's kind of the same thing. If we type Python, because of some Unix backward compatibility issues, 2.7 has to be installed on the Linux system or anything Unix-based. But 2.7 isn't going to work with our latest version of pygame 2.0, I think. So same thing. So we need Python 3, which on the Linux system, well, it's obviously different for the Linux system, but if you're a Linux user, you know which one to use. The built-in one on Chromebooks is a Debian system related to Ubuntu and a couple others. So to install stuff, we use sudo apt install Python 3, which I should already have installed. Yeah, it's already installed, so nothing to worry about there. Excuse me. And then once that's installed, once again, you have to type Python 3 to get to one that's compatible with the current version of pygame. And then it's just like we saw in the Mac. Change to documents /delete. There's the class 1 example prep, the files from the other day. Oops. And I will try to remember not to put spaces in those since all the examples I'm using the prompts and terminals, so shells. So it's probably better not to have spaces in these file names. But if there's spaces in the names, remember to wrap them in quote marks. Things are space delimited in command prompts and terminals. So if you include spaces in file names, remember the quote marks. But once we're in there, you can see the same files. And I think on here I have Sublime test1.py. So the Sublime text editor, same file we just looked at twice. Bring in the game, the bare minimum. Bring in the game, the initial setup stuff, screen, the main loop that just checks our quit event, and then the WASD keys, a background image, and an image we can move, and then a graceful shutdown when it's done. So kind of the bare minimum for pygame. Not really doing anything there yet. I'm going to close that. And just like we saw on the Mac, since we have multiple versions of Python running, we want to make sure we run Python 3 interpreter and then the Python script we want to run. And at that point, it'll open up our game, can move it around, just like we saw on the other systems. Close that, shut down gracefully, and exit the prompter. So I just wanted to share that video. You can see it's very, very similar in all the systems. So that was one I should have pointed out in class the other day. On a Linux or Mac OS system, you'll want to make sure and explicitly state the Python 3 interpreter, because any Unix-based system has to have Python 2 for backward compatibility. Still, in the future, that might change. But for now, just remember to type Python 3, and we need that pip instruction. I guess I should explicitly show that on the Linux. Back in the terminal, if you need that pip instruction, if we just type pip again, likewise, Linux doesn't know what it is, so we have to type Python 3 as a module, so -m, hold pip, install pygame. And it's already installed, but it runs and no error message. It says it already has it. So enough to see that you can see it's running. So a slight difference there, but you'll notice that except for that 3 tacked on the end and how we access pip, those are very, very similar. I should have pointed that out in class the other day and didn't realize it until I was reviewing videos from the week. And it was like 45 seconds after I explicitly stated that I would say differences. So I thought I'd make a video and share that with y'all. Thanks. See you in class.